OCD family community, can you believe we're already at the end of June? I mean, this month has flown by, and we're nearly at the fulcrum of summer break for my little family. And yes, you heard that correctly. I said fulcrum, nerd alert, but I wear that badge proudly. And hey, June is also Pride Month. And so, what better time to highlight SO-OCD and gender OCD, otherwise known as sexual orientation and gender themed subtypes of OCD? Now, lest the names and the relevance of talking about this during Pride Month confuses you, these themes don't actually have any impact on who you are, how you identify, or your sexuality. So, if it's not about that, then why the name and why highlight it during Pride Month? It's a great question. If you're new to the fam or have been around for a hot minute, this is worth repeating. OCD is OCD is OCD. OCD is about the presence of these sticky, intrusive thoughts or obsessional doubts. These intrusions or inferences are not character statements or even remotely close to who we are. To the contrary, these thoughts are what we call ego dystonic, who we would never want to be, miles from what we value, and comprised of feared possibilities. And that thought is then followed by compulsions, which we simplify as physical or mental acts aimed to minimize, neutralize, or avoid the distress and ensure that we're not this monster that could possibly think these thoughts, right? Rinse, lather, and repeat, and we've got ourselves an OCD spiral, a sequence that is very distressing and torturous. So then, what is sexual orientation and gender-themed OCD? Well, as OCD is masterful in targeting our values, then is it any surprise that OCD could target something as vulnerable and sacred, something as important as our sexuality or our sense of identity? No, that sounds actually very on brand for OCD. So whether you're a cisgender heterosexual or identify and love in any other ways, SO and gender-themed OCD can be a theme. But let's pause here for a second. So how do you know if questioning is part of OCD or it's just a part of sexual development or trying to understand yourself, your identity? I mean, this is the catch-22 OCD would love for you to continue to consider and consider and consider, because what if you got that wrong? I mean, that'd be a pretty big deal, right? You should make sure that what you think you know is what you actually know. And it's a great question. So remember how we just talked about what ego dystonic meant? Well, adjacent and equally important is the term egosyntonic. My abridged definition for this is when something is in line with your values. So no matter where a person falls on the spectrum, true sexual orientation and gender identity are core to the construct of who we are, aligned with your values or belief systems. It doesn't mean a person won't face distress or microaggressions. In fact, this is a huge reason why Pride Month is celebrated in the first place. Yes, the anthem of love is important. But as we talked about in our last Pride-themed water cooler chat, it's also a way to honor the history and advocate for it not being repeated, remembering these Stonewall riots and how we need to do better on how we treat our fellow human beings. It's as much a celebration as a battle cry for safety in living one's authentic self. It's based in liberation, justice, and a striving for equality. So microaggressions and minority stresses can and do happen, and they are experienced for folks with egosyntonic sexual orientations and gender identities. That is real too. But it's categorically different than an intrusion or an inference about what if who I think I am and who I think I love, what if I got that wrong? What if I secretly feel or am a different person than I believe myself to be? And what would that mean for me, for the people I love, for my relationships? For anyone that has ever felt a semblance of that feared possibility, whether connected to their identity, their sexuality, or anything else, you know that is OCD. And I recognize that sexuality and identity isn't linear. I don't pretend to get it all. And as a cishet myself, I also acknowledge my privilege and naivete even. But as always, fam, I'm going to encourage us all to have an open stance and risk the vulnerability of having conversations, whether we get it or not. Because there is a huge difference between value-driven curiosity, exploration, or even fluidity, and imagined, possible, distressing questions that feel dire and could or would be the worst thing if fill in the blank. One is grounded in reality of who you're learning yourself to be, and the other in the endless imagined possibilities. So, how do we treat SO or gender themed OCD? Well, we treat it the same way we treat all other manifestations of OCD. My go tos are inference based CBT and exposure and response prevention. Because OCD is OCD is OCD, right? And these are our evidence based practices. But here is where I'm going to insert my disclaimer on this, fam, because hey, a few things. A, this isn't therapy, but also B, we need to acknowledge and recognize that as a practitioner community, we haven't always gotten this right. Whether using harmful language that isn't representative and further perpetuates stereotypes like homosexual or trans OCD, or, for example, when we think of exposure and response prevention, an ERP lens, where this could look like creating exposures that miss the core fear altogether and reduce members of the LGBTQIA plus community to props or idealize heteronormativity. Fam, the damage has been done, and trust is earned. So I'll point the fam and practitioners alike to the call for action penned by Dr. Caitlin Pensiati et al. On recommendations for justice-based treatment of OCD with sexual orientation and gender themes. And the highlights on the citation couldn't have summarized it better. That, quote, historical treatment of SO and gender-themed OCD perpetuates marginalization. Updated CBT and ERP treatment recommendations for this presentation are provided, and these recommendations consider the intersection of treatment outcomes and social justice, end quote. So I'll have this citation linked over on this episode's blog at ocdfamilypodcast.com so you can check it out. But it's such a well-researched, thoughtfully written pillar of advocacy, so don't miss it. It is worth the read. Additionally, Katie Merritt of OCD Training School has been publishing some fantastic blogs over at ocdtrainingschool.com, among which she has addressed the danger of cis heteronormative and queerphobic rhetoric and LGBTQIA plus stereotypes from an ICBT lens. She highlights how rhetoric can embed harmful stereotypes and societal prejudice into obsessional reasoning, further using irrelevant associations of misleading or culturally biased information to reinforce obsessions without the direct evidence. So, if you're new to ICBT, you might be like, come again? But I am going to encourage you to read her blog because she spells it out beautifully, and she's actually written a number of blogs that are worth the read, particularly as we conceptualize safe and effective treatment for these subtypes of OCD. So again, I'll have everything linked over on the blog, but I'm so glad we could have this chat here at the water cooler. Because who we are matters, not who OCD gaslights we could be. And fam, we're better together. We're not alone. And this world is a better place with each and every one of us in it.